Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about negotiating a job offer. I found this really cool article and I've sourced it here. They go into it a lot more, so that would be something good to check out. So there's 15 rules basically that this author recommends. So the rule 1 is likability. So basically nobody's going to want you on their team or even fight for you if you appear less likable. And of course this is easier said than done, but it's also important to be persistent and polite when dealing with negotiations. You don't want to come across as being greedy, and pointing out all these flaws and things like that, so that can be a huge pitfall. And then also to practice with perhaps a trusted family, friend, just to see what kind of a reaction you might get. The rule 2 is, why do you deserve it? So you need to understand perspective in these negotiation settings so that you come across as competent and you understand exactly what you are going to be wanting in the deal. So it's important to have justification. So if you do want to stay at home, then you gotta ensure that you at least have some data or at least present a justifiable reason as to why you want to stay at home or why that is something you are negotiating for. Rule 3 is clarity. Sometimes it might come across as, you've just been greedy, so it's important that you make it clear that you're serious about working for the employer, and especially if it's on a long-term basis. And then show that you're excited to work for them and that you would be happy to accept the offer from them. Rule 4 is understanding. There's this quote in the article that says, people negotiate, not companies, so it's important to recognize the person's interests and concerns. So if you are negotiating with your boss, it's going to be a little bit different than negotiating with an HR rep, for instance. So it's important to recognize the company's interest and also your boss's interests. Rule 5 is about constraints. So sometimes some companies do have certain budgets in place, so they cannot move on that. They won't be able to increase it or decrease it. But there's also other items that you could have out on the table. So maybe something like vacation time, start date, signing bonuses. There's so many options available despite the employer's constraints, and this actually could solve both sides of the table. So it could solve your problem as well as the employer's constraints that they may have at that point. Rule 6 is to be prepared. So sometimes it can get overwhelming, but it's best never to lie in a negotiating setting, because that just decreases the amount of trust, especially since you're going to be working with the employer, so you don't want to have that option available just to lie. So that's never a good idea. So just be prepared to answer tough questions too that they could potentially throw out on the table. You always want to seem like the best candidate, and you want to make sure that you're being prepared in terms of these tougher questions. Rule 7 is to be focused on the questioner's intent. So always engage in genuine conversation and try to act as like a problem solver, because that could definitely help you out in these negotiating settings, as opposed to fighting, if that makes sense. So rule 8 is to consider the whole deal. So we talked about this a little bit before, but basically don't always just be fixated on the salary amount. There's so many other options available, such as responsibilities, location, travel, growth, maybe additional perks, continuing education. All of those things are actually important to your self-development, so it's important not to just be fixated on that number, especially if they are given budget constraints. So rule 9 is to negotiate multiple issues simultaneously. So the article points out that, you shouldn't be starting off by saying, this is too low, could you do something about it, and then also ask for more things. So basically, if you care about one or two things, so instance, like you want to work from home, or you want to leave work early, something like that. So pick those two things. For example, I'm just giving an example. Pick those things that you value the most, and then hopefully they're able to meet you halfway. Rule 10 is to not negotiate just to negotiate, and not to fight over every little thing, basically. And you could eventually, if you do like the company, and especially if there's a lot of growth, you could always negotiate later with the company when it actually may matter more, and they might not have as many constraints as they do upon signing the offer letter in the beginning. Rule number 11 is timing. So depending on the timing, if you pull too much back or if you push too hard, a company could lose interest and just hire somebody else, especially if there is rapid growth with that given company. And so what you want to do is you want to delay an offer because, maybe you have a couple interviews lined up, or you could even request for a second or third interview. Rule number 12 is to avoid ultimatums. Nobody wants to be told, do this or else I will, ... So that's never a good idea. If this does occur from the employer side, you should always try to be tactful and always say something like, I can see how this might be difficult. Perhaps we could talk about, this matter, and this matter maybe later on, or even reschedule, or even call back later, but to basically avoid these at all costs. Rule number 13 is, nobody's out to get you. If you are far past the interview and you're at the negotiation stages, then there's a very high likelihood that they actually want you and want you to be on the team. A delay in the offer means that you are not the only concern that the hiring manager has now, so it's really important to be patient, even though it can be tough and it's easier said than done, obviously, but be patient and stay in touch. Rule 14 is to stay at the table. So what's not negotiable today may be negotiable tomorrow. Constraints and these interests can always change, and perhaps in the beginning it's a no, but down the line it could be a yes. And then the last rule is perspective is key. So experience and research demonstrate that the industry and the function that you choose to work, your career trajectory, all of these are a lot more important than the satisfaction of the details of the offer. So it's important to keep the big picture in mind, essentially, is what this rule is pointing out to. And these tips would actually be effective only after a thoughtful, holistic job hunt has been done. So you need to ensure that you're looking out for yourself, but also you are applying to the right company, especially if there's growth and things like that. So it's important that you are on the right path before you even venture into these negotiation tools and tips. So I really hope this was helpful, and hopefully you'll see me in the next learning and development series.